Good morning, Dawg Nation. I am Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Merriweather and Tharp. And by the way, how stately does the Merriweather and Tharp logo look on the desk here as we get ready to welcome in the show? We're doing something a little bit different in terms of our guest, or I should say our sponsor presentation, which y'all don't care about. I totally realize that. But it's a little bit of a new era for us, kind of putting that on the desk. I've just been sort of noticing that. I would say that Merriweather and Tharp looks so sharp right there, so professional. I don't know. That just looks really good to me. That stands out to my eyes. I noticed that as we get ready to begin today's show. And speaking of today's show, presented by Merriweather and Tharp, I think you're going to really like it. Before we're done today, Georgia athletics outside of football got really good news yesterday. We'll tell you why this is relevant as the Diamond Dogs get ready to roll into the NCAA tournament. SEC tournament visit got cut short, but honestly, I don't think they're too worried about that. There's even perhaps, though, at least for today, even bigger news, though, than the action on the Diamond. We'll give you that for that team here coming up. A Big Ten coach has said one of the most, I think, asinine things I've ever heard. We will obviously address that. We'll get a chance to also hear from five-star linebacker Tyler Atkinson on today's show. He was a guest last night on Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger with Jeff Sentell and Kaylee Manziel. But to kick things off, prior to all of that, oh yeah, by the way, Terrence Edwards joins us today too. To kick things off, there is one big national website using Georgia once again as the basis, maybe for some clicks, I don't know, suggesting that one of the big rivalry games for Georgia here this year could be a game in which Georgia is on upset alert. We'll talk about this, both the real and perhaps fictional aspects to all of this discussion. We'll kick it off with that here today. We are glad to have you with us for it. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Merriweather and Tharp, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Merriweather and Tharp, your source for Georgia divorce. Find them online at georgiadivorceteam.com.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
I have one small goal in mind every day when I do the show. It's to simply be, and I know this is going to come across as, trite or whatever, but I mean this legitimately. I want to try to be as honest as I can possibly be. Now, when I say honest I can possibly be, what I mean by that is if we all try to tell the truth, I think, but the caveat is the truth as we understand it. Does that make sense that, different people sort of see things in sometimes slightly different ways? Obviously, I've got some really kind of odd opinions, but once again, even when I'm expressing sort of an odd opinion, I'm trying to do it from a place of this is my honest thoughts on this as well as I'm able to convey them. So I'm always thinking about that before every show. Hey, never obviously knowingly lie and, never kind of couch a conversation just to give yourself something to say, to get through a show, to create content, or never kind of shape a discussion just in order to sort of tell people what they want to hear. Eventually, if you do that kind of thing too much, you just sort of get found out. And obviously, we've lasted 10 years, hope to last, many decades more. And so therefore, I think a pretty successful and safe strategy, frankly, to make sure we're able to do that is to step in here every day and as well as I understand the truth, as capable as I am of conveying the truth, try to tell the truth. So sometimes that's sort of a good thing for Georgia, and sometimes maybe it might be the opposite. One of the things that we've said a few times here lately, and I do genuinely believe this to be the truth, is that I kind of think the personnel for Georgia this season is a little bit underrated, at least potentially. We certainly know that Georgia's got some really key areas for improvement, that there are various position groups, probably on both sides of the ball, a lot of this on offense though, various position groups that if all you do is come out and replicate what you did a year ago, that is not going to probably be good news in terms of how close Georgia comes to accomplishing a lot of its end-of-season goals. And yet we also believe that given the talent that's sort of waiting in the wings, that there is more than just like wishing and hoping. There's actually some educated guessing that you could do to assume that offensive line comes together and perhaps clicks as a cohesive unit better than it did a year ago. We like the individual parts. We don't know how well it added together last season. We've said that before. We think it could be better this year. running game, as one of our commenters mentioned before the show began today, was kind of abysmal a year ago. And whether it be because you bring in a veteran like Josh McCray or a guy like Nate Frazier takes the next step, or because the offensive line we just discussed, maybe they play better, you think, well, maybe that could be better too, that Georgia's clearly got some issues. Like everybody else in the country, they've got unanswered questions, but we kind of think that, boy, it seems like right now people are perhaps overstating Georgia's problems and maybe kind of either overlooking or underrated what I think has a chance to be a long list of strengths for the Dogs here this season. But here's where like the honest part of the conversation comes in, because if you're a Georgia fan like me, you like the idea of, hey, Georgia's going to be improved in all these areas and all these issues that were problems a year ago. Well, they're going to be fine this year. Georgia fans kind of like that. That sounds like really good news. But here's the part I think that you might not like quite as much, but the best that I understand it, I do believe this is an honest assessment of the situation. That even with what could be some real and legitimate improvement in some areas where Georgia really needs it, I think the overall picture of exactly how Georgia will fare in 2025 is still actually a little bit murky, because one of the things that I just think is probably true is that just like a year ago, we would have said, boy, the biggest issue facing Georgia is this incredibly daunting schedule. In 2025, even though I think that people broadly speaking, national media, fans from other teams, various places where internet college football conversations are taking place, I don't think that Georgia is getting as much attention for its schedule. For instance, it's not currently ranked by a lot of these analytics type people. It's not currently ranked as the toughest schedule in college football the way that it was a year ago by, like, say, ESPN, FPI, and things like that. By reputation, that's not what the Georgia schedule is. But when I think about how I think the college football season could unfold this year, I actually think that the Georgia schedule in 2025 has a pretty legitimate shot of being about as tough as it was a year ago. So to kind of summarize, you've got this situation where Georgia may literally be better in some areas where it needs improvement. Therefore, the overall personnel that it's putting on the field here in 2025 could be superior to what it was a year ago, but it's still not certain to what exactly that's going to add up to be, just given the fact that I actually think, for maybe perhaps different reasons than a year ago, the Georgia schedule here this year is almost just as tough as it was last season. And one of the reasons why some people sort of think, well, schedule's easier now is because what looked like really tough road games last season at Vaught-Hemingway Stadium, a place that Georgia didn't play well, at Bryant-Denny Stadium, a place where Georgia lost and kind of one of the craziest games any of us have ever seen, even in Austin, Texas, a game that Georgia won, you had all these incredibly tough road environments. And the one thing that everybody paid attention to when it came to the Georgia schedule a year ago is, my gosh, how tough all of these road games are. That's going to be incredibly difficult for UGA. And the narrative thus far this offseason has been, well, all of a sudden now, Bama, Texas, Ole Miss, all of a sudden now, these are all home games. And so therefore the Georgia schedule is easier. But I got to tell you something. I think with these games shifting past, should say shifting back to being home games for Georgia, or in the case of Texas, home game for the first time, Alabama, a home game for the first time in the Kirby Smart era, with these games shifting to being played between the hedges, I think there is still going to be a pretty important collection of incredibly tough road games for UGA that I do think that Georgia fans should already be thinking about. It's not too soon to be thinking about just how challenging some of these road environments could be for Georgia. First big game of the year is Tennessee. We'll talk plenty about that. But for a second, I want to focus in on another tough road game that we think that Georgia's going to play here in this upcoming season, and that is Auburn. And I want to remind you of what Kirby Smart has sort of said about these things in the past, whether it was going to Vaught-Hemingway or Bryant-Denny or DKR a year ago, or whether it's Neyland Stadium or Jordan-Hare Stadium here this year, that the thing that makes the SEC different than the Big Ten and the other conferences, the defining characteristic of this league right now are these really intense home environments that Georgia feeds off of when it's in Sanford Stadium, but Georgia also kind of has to contend with when it goes on the road, including later on this year at a place like Jordan-Hare Stadium. Let's get a reminder from Kirby Smart about, in his earnest belief, just how tough it is to play on the road in the SEC and how difficult that kind of thing was for Georgia in 2024. Here's a reminder from Kirby Smart last fall.
First question I would ask is, what was the record last year on the road for ranked teams? Because I don't think it's changed. It's hard. It's hard to play on the road in the SEC. Now, maybe more of them are happening at night because of the television contract. I don't know that. I don't really know that. I don't know those stats. It's not any harder this year than it was last year. It's just hard. And so maybe it's shown up more.
So Kirby Smart says, hey, it could be that it's just getting more attention now, but it's always hard to win on the road in the SEC, especially now that the ABC, ESPN television package seems to be providing. It certainly did for Georgia. Maybe it is for everybody else too, although some of these teams sort of always seem to get those night game gifts. Different topic for a different day. All of a sudden now you've got seemingly more high-profile night games, and the home team is just thriving. There's fireworks, and there's drone shows, and there's sometimes friendly officiating. We saw some of that a year ago. Really, really tough to go on the road in the SEC. And as I said before, one of those tough road dates for Georgia is at Jordan-Hare Stadium, a place that we've seen Georgia have to battle with in the past. And my reason for singling that out is there was a story at CBSSports.com the other day about, big-time college football teams that could be on upset watch, which is, I guess, a little bit like Panda Watch from the old Anchorman movie, the teams that could be on upset watch for the upcoming season. Now, let me kind of give you kind of a quick aside here for a second, acknowledge the elephant in the room, and then we'll actually talk about this topic a little bit more specifically. When you see this story existing on the internet, those of us who are cynical, which certainly I am, many of you are more cynical even than me, you sort of already know Georgia's going to be on the list because it just seems like right now Georgia is the sort of punching bag of, hey, they've been the behemoth, but are they still that way? They've been the two-time national champions, but have they slipped? Is Kirby Smart, flummoxed by this NIL stuff or whatever? That, Georgia's the sort of big established program that's kind of become easy to sort of take some jabs at, take some shots at. So when there's a story on the internet of power programs who could be on upset watch, you and me both sort of already know that Georgia's going to be on this list. In fact, they were sort of the featured team in this particular list. But I want to read you the quote anyway because I do think this sort of matters. Writer at CBS mentioning the Georgia-Auburn game as a potential upset watch type thing for Georgia here this season, saying that sandwiched between home games with Kentucky and Ole Miss, the reigning SEC champions go to the Plains in mid-October in hopes of continuing their recent dominance in the rivalry series. For Hugh Freeze, it says, this home game is as big as they come. Georgia has won 8 straight against Auburn, dating back to a victory in the 2017 SEC championship. CBS goes on to conclude the Tigers upended the Bulldogs a few weeks prior during the regular season, but that's the program's last win over Kirby Smart. And that's obviously true. Georgia has completely dominated Auburn, but as Kirby Smart warned us, there is something different about these big-time home games or when you're the team having to go on the road facing these big-time environments. And we do expect Jordan-Hare to be a big-time environment for Georgia to face. And if you want to go back to early days of Kirby Smart, 2017 a win, I should say a loss for Georgia, 2019 a win, playing at Jordan-Hare Stadium at the time was sort of thought to be a really tough place to be. That hasn't been as true in the Hugh Freeze era, but if you've heard me say this already this offseason, I actually believe that Auburn is on the verge of figuring some stuff out. I do kind of take CBS seriously here that when I think about the games on the Georgia schedule in 2025 that I'm the most, I don't want to say nervous about because I don't think I'm nervous, but certainly games that have my attention, facing what I believe could be an improved Auburn team on the road, yeah, that's a game I have circled. So to go back to the whole idea of being honest, as much as I'd love to sit here and tell you, these CBS people are doubting Georgia. They think Georgia's going to go 7-5. As much as I'd love to sort of fan the flames of that, and sort of from a fun standpoint, I'm happy to do it. From a more, I guess, analytical perspective, I'm here to tell you, road games like this at Auburn, Tennessee, that you've had, success with, I do think these are games in which Georgia fans need to be, and more importantly, the Georgia coaches and players, I do think you need to be really, really careful with this. And it's these games on the road against teams that Georgia's dominated but are seeking improvement. These are the sorts of games that could make, as I alluded to, the 2025 schedule feel about as tough, if not tougher, than it was in 2024. I think that's a real possibility. But that said, let's also kind of have some fun with this here for a moment, because while I'll sit here and say, hey, I think that Auburn could be tough for Georgia. I think that Auburn could be one of the improved teams in the SEC. I do genuinely believe that. While CBS is circling that game as a upset alert type thing for Georgia here this season. It's kind of funny that some of us seem to believe this. I'm actually not quite so sure how much Auburn coach Hugh Freeze seems to believe this. This was something we talked about the other day, that Freeze went on with a show that I like, guys I have genuine respect for. They're called The Next Round. They've done a really good job of kind of cultivating a digital media presence in Alabama, much like we do here for DawgNation Daily. I've always got respect for people who are doing that. And in the discussion with Auburn coach Hugh Freeze, Freeze did something that I feel like he kind of does a lot of, which is an incredible opportunity of just sort of knowing exactly how to say the exact wrong thing. We talked about this in the show the other day, but I want to play you the clip now because you got CBS saying Auburn may upset Georgia. You've got me saying I think Auburn's an improved team, an opponent that Georgia does need to be careful with. But when you listen to how timid Hugh Freeze's expectations are for the upcoming year, I'm not quite so sure that Hugh Freeze believes of his team what some of these national media types seem to believe of it right now. This is from last week on a show called The Next Round. Hugh Freeze saying something that has sort of once again kind of made his own fans mad. This is funny to me. Take a listen to this.
Going into this season, does it feel a little bit different? Do you feel like, hey, I've got to win X amount of games?
I'm not a fool. I think we've got to go to a bowl game. And I think our administration understands. Look, I inherited a program that didn't have a top 25 recruiting class for 4 years. You're not going to win in this league. We've had now 2 full recruiting classes, both top 10. I think one more than your roster looks complete. But I'm still not naive. And we should have won some games last year that we could have won some games. I shouldn't say we should. We could have won some games last year. And we've got to find a way to make sure we're excellent in those areas that cost us those, that put us in a position to be at least bowl eligible, if not more. And I see no reason why we shouldn't do that. And I think that's an expectation that our people should expect.
So get the context here. You got national media people are like, I think Auburn's going to upset Georgia. You've got the coach of the team saying, man, I just hope we go to a bowl game. Like, what in the world is that from Hugh Freeze? And it's the same sort of thing like he said a couple of years ago. Do you remember when Georgia was getting ready to play Auburn? I think it was the first time in the Hugh Freeze era, I guess it would have been. And, to his credit, they did play well against Georgia that day. But, like, leading into the game, he's like, I don't really think of Georgia-Auburn as a rivalry. And Auburn fans were like, trust me, Hugh, this is a rivalry. And it's the same type of deal here right now where Hugh Freeze begins that clip by saying, hey, I'm not an idiot. I know the expectations here. And I think Auburn fans are now ready to hear him say, man, we got to make a big run towards like competing for the college football playoff. We got to get back in some of these rivalry series. We got to do some of this. And instead, Freeze is like, we got to make a bowl game. Like, what? You got, CBS Sports saying it's time to beat Georgia. And he's like, listen, I'm just trying to punch a ticket for Shreveport. Like, what in the world is that from Hugh Freeze? So, now, some of this is just probably sort of the natural coach speak, the sandbagging, the attempt to sort of downplay expectations. I would tell him, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this later in the show, that sort of thing is not going to work, that Auburn fans do have a living memory of when Jordan-Hare Stadium was a really tough place to play, not just for Georgia, but in-state rival Alabama. It was inside of a decade ago that Auburn was winning both those games at home in the same year. and that is the level of expectation that exists there. So no matter what weird stuff that Hugh Freeze might be saying, the overall bottom line is I do think that Georgia fans should take some of this a little seriously, even if you are like me and of the assumption that Georgia's going to show some improvement in some key areas. Even with that improvement that we believe is going to take place, honestly, I think this 2025 schedule for Georgia looks really, really tough. For the games you already know about, Texas, Alabama, but also some of these games that maybe are due to get more attention this year than they've got in the past, including a road trip at Auburn. CBS says upset alert. I don't know about that. I don't know that Georgia loses the game, but I do think it's the sort of game that Georgia takes seriously, among many on this 2025 slate for the Dogs. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by our friends at Merriweather and Tharp. We are happy you're with us, no matter how you get to us. Video, 10 a.m. across all platforms, radio, Athens Sports Radio 96 The Ref, podcast, wherever you find them. Apple, Spotify, posting the show at the world-famous DawgNation.com. Lots of platforms, a lot of great folks helping us get the show on the air, and we're just thankful for all of that, and thankful to our great friends at Merriweather and Tharp who make the show possible too. And I love Merriweather and Tharp, even though the thing that they are known for doing is not something that any of us love. We all have our own story with divorce. For some of you, it's a personal story about how it's impacted your life. You've been through your divorce. You saw your parents get a divorce. For others of us, it's close friends or distant relatives or just people in our lives that we work with, for instance. Divorce in some form or fashion, just based on the statistics, it impacts all of us in some form or fashion. And in an audience the size of ours, it is a very real reality for thousands of you who are listening to us here right now. And so that's one of the reasons why, even though divorce is a little bit of a touchy subject, scary, confusing, I don't hesitate at all and use the same level of enthusiasm to speak about Merriweather and Tharp that I would anything else we discuss here on this show. Because here's what I believe, is that for people who find themselves in one of the most challenging situations they're ever going to face, at least the potential of that, having a strong advocate on your side who is going to work diligently for you, act generously on your behalf, that's the best gift you can ever give yourself. And that's now true across the entire state of Georgia. That's why the website reflects that now. It's GeorgiaDivorceTeam.com. GeorgiaDivorceTeam.com. Look, if you've got questions about the divorce process, you should know that Merriweather and Tharp has answers. And you should also know that in thousands of instances of the past of working with people who have questions that are perhaps similar to yours, Merriweather and Tharp has also kind of shaped and crafted their service to sort of anticipate people's needs there as well. And one of the big issues is related to the cost certainty that people seek when they go through the divorce process. You should know when you check out the website, GeorgiaDivorceTeam.com, you're going to see this, that they've shaped various levels of service to sort of match people's needs, from like a DIY all the way up to obviously the sort of full service traditional representation. They've also got their model M&T service kind of in the middle of that kind of gives you kind of the best of both worlds. It's really creative. It's the kind of thing that could only be crafted by super smart people, which is what Bob Tharp and his team are all about. So please find them online. GeorgiaDivorceTeam.com. GeorgiaDivorceTeam.com. Merriweather and Tharp is your source for Georgia divorce. All right, we got a great show here coming up. It's Terrence Edwards in just a couple of minutes. We always love our Thursday conversation with Terrence. We perhaps have more change on the way to the college football playoff, and I don't mean like distant future. I mean in the immediate present. We'll kind of get into some of that with Terrence here a little bit, at least based on what we think we know right now. Some of that is on the way. Prior to that, though, let's get ready to go around the Doghouse, presented today by our friends at Daytona Beach. Love them. Glad to have them as a part of the show. And I want to take a moment to kind of go back to last night here in the DawgNation video channel, something perhaps you saw. I think we got a really important update from five-star linebacker Tyler Atkinson. I'm telling you right now, of all the players we talk about, Atkinson is probably the guy I feel like I know the best, not personally, but just I've seen him play since he was a freshman in high school. And as y'all already know, this is a dazzling prospect. And it's interesting in that he seems to be both I think one of the best players we've seen in Georgia in recent memory, regardless of position, right up there, certainly with anybody you want to compare him to. Also the kind of player that Georgia just always seems to thrive with. and we're going to hear some of this from Tyler here in a moment. The great kind of inside linebacker. Georgia seems to always sort of have a lot of that. I'll also say that it's interesting that if it's worth going to see the full edition of Before the Hedges presented by Kroger last night, because one of the things you'll see is that Atkinson kind of got a top 10, but he's a little coy right now of those 10 finalists who he's actually going to take official visits to see, because you know the kind of pressure you get, hey, visit us, visit us, visit us. And, you know, these guys, and listen, this has sort of always been true for recruiting. It's certainly still true now. There's only so much time on the calendar. You know, a couple of years ago, they made a big deal about unlimited official visits. Well, even if you wanted to take unlimited official visits, there's still only a finite amount of time you can spend doing all of this. And the hardest part about recruiting sort of always been sort of letting the ones that don't get the visit, or the ones you're not going to, you know, come to school there, kind of letting them know. It's always been sort of the toughest part of that. So Atkinson, we would say, well within his rights right now to sort of play this close to the vest. He's not fully revealing where he'll be visiting, you know, kind of the top 10, who's really in the kind of closest consideration here. But it's worth noting he's had a long-time relationship with Georgia. And as we addressed on the show the other day, based on Jeff Sentell's reporting, it seems like Clemson's making a really strong charge here. It's been kind of the summer of Clemson here thus far, both on the field and in recruiting, at least in various ways. Kind of interesting to see the reemergence of a program that a lot of the media kind of left for dead, but that's a different topic for a different day. For now, let's kind of fixate and focus on exactly how Atkinson, the five-star linebacker, how he views Georgia at the moment. And one of the things that we're hearing from Tyler is very similar to what linebackers like him have been saying for a very long time. This is a young man that has a very deep and also continually growing relationship, it would seem, with inside linebackers coach and Georgia defensive coordinator Glenn Schumann. This is Tyler Atkinson last night from Before the Hedges.
Well, you know, Coach Shu, our relationship is just it's a great relationship. But knowing him since 8th grade, and just the relationship we have established, and then, you know, I got to talk to Roquan Smith the other day, just to hear from him and the impact he had at Georgia. You know, it just been a great it just more stuff from Georgia keeps coming along, and, you know, the relationship with Coach Shu just keeps getting better and better each time we talk.
So the relationship with Coach Schumann keeps getting better. Seemingly a deeper relationship growing with Georgia because of that. It's also been interesting to see all the ways in which Georgia's kind of pulled out of the stops for Atkinson too. Some of this has been a great former linebacker like Roquan Smith. Some of this has recently been, and a lot of this stuff went viral even kind of outside our normal DawgNation circles, with Jalen Walker kind of making a big impression on Tyler Atkinson. And to hear Atkinson say it, he obviously likes the influence these guys are trying to have on him, because these are certainly great players and well paid in the NFL. But as he says it also gives a little bit of a template for how he could be used here at Georgia as well. More from Tyler Atkinson on that.
So just the relationship over there, it's just great. Me and Jay Walk, we talk. We got a good relationship. When we talk about ball and talk about regular stuff. So he's just a great guy overall. You know, they got me being all over the field when it comes to being that chess piece linebacker. You know, rushing the quarterback, playing the run, being in pass drops, and so they just got me being that chess piece linebacker. Yeah.
I love the idea of the chess piece linebacker. I think that's really well said, and I think this is just a really interesting player. Now, this is not going to be an easy one for Georgia. We talked about Clemson. You obviously kind of think of a program like Ohio State here. And it's also not the only linebacker that Georgia's kind of in the mix for. But it'd be hard-pressed for me to say there's any better than Atkinson. Really interesting interview with him and Jeff Sentell last night. And that is around the Doghouse, and it's presented today by our friends at Daytona Beach. And as much as I love the great linebackers, I also love my chance to be at the beach, want to be there as much as I can get. Jealous of many of you, because with this sort of 3-day holiday weekend coming up, many of you making your plans to be at the beach and do stuff like that. I'll be, I guess, living vicariously for you, although certainly secretly hating you for being where I am not. But either way, when it's time for a beach getaway for you, we want you to keep Daytona Beach on your mind. It's a beach that I grew up going to. When we're talking about Daytona Beach and we show this little video on the screen, so many of these landmarks and things like that are things that I've literally, like the Ponce Inlet Lighthouse, I've been seeing my entire life. And some of my best memories involve my parents and then even my grandparents going there to Daytona Beach. And I love the fact that new memories are being made at Daytona Beach each and every season, each and every week. So if you love great restaurants, you like golf, you like fishing, you like surfing, obviously the Great American Race, people kind of know that, but it's not the only thing to know about Daytona. And there's an international airport that can get you there. It's 23 miles of shoreline, and there's great savings on some wonderful hotels and resorts here right now. So check out DaytonaBeach.com/hotel deals for more on that. That's DaytonaBeach.com/hotel deals for more on that today. All right, glad to have Daytona Beach as a part of Around the Doghouse. Also, we'll tell you this, before we're done, good news for Georgia away from the football team. This is important. Dawgs making kind of a big flex here this week in a way that really matters. I'll tell you about that. Also, a coach who said some kind of, what I would say, dumb things before, may have said the dumbest thing I've ever heard here today, or at least in recent memory. We'll give you that before the show is done today as well. But on a Thursday, you love it. It's one of my favorite times of the week, too. How about the great former Dawg, the 1,000-yard receiver himself, the exclusive member of that club here for UGA, Terrence Edwards, here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Say hello to Terrence Edwards, no doubt looking forward to wrapping up his school year. Obviously for football, of course, the work kind of begins in the summer. There's not going to be a lot of, probably pool days in Terrence's future necessarily. But Terrence, I feel like even for me, summer for me, I just still work every day like any other time. But I do get really fun vibes around like the last day of school. I do kind of get that little summer feeling, even if like I said, for me, I'm still working. Having been around the school here this year and watching, I don't know when the last day for you is officially, but kind of watching the school year come to an end, you get those summer vibes still like you did when a kid, even though y'all going to be doing, workouts and lifts and stuff like that. Do you still get good summer vibes here around the last day of school?
Oh, yes, I do. Last day for us is tomorrow. So, you could tell that the school is winding down. Kids are not here as much. The traffic around the school is not as much. The seniors have already departed the school. So the vibe is definitely going into the summer. And and for me, next week is dead week. So for high school, we do get a little break off before we jump into our summer workouts.
Yeah, when you get those dead weeks, man, a couple times a year, grabbing hold of that and making sure you use that to its full value. I know enough coaches to know that's one of the most important things to do, to just soak it up, whether you sort of stay home or you go somewhere, whatever else, to take full advantage of that dead week when you get it. College, guys are the same way. They're going to have some of that in July this year. But taking advantage of that dead week, one of the most important things a coach can do, right?
It is. And you try to encourage the families to take advantage of this dead week as well. We have two in high school football now. So you try to encourage the families to try to take their vacation on those 2 dead weeks and not the weeks that we'll actually be working. But of course, my family is going to go out and enjoy some sun. Then I know June 2nd starts our summer workouts, and it's full start ahead after that.
I love it. That's awesome stuff. We were talking about Tyler Atkinson a second ago, linebacker. I know a lot of times we'll lean on you for your impression of receivers, things like that. I know you're busy kind of coaching your own team. I'm not sure how much of Atkinson you've seen, but have you seen much of him? I feel like I've been watching him pretty closely since he was a freshman. Grayson's always got great players. But, man, at a position that Georgia typically dominates with, inside linebacker play, also creatively using those guys, Jalen Walker, an example of that. Atkinson's one of the best I've seen in this state in recent memory. How much have you seen, if any, of Tyler Atkinson?
I have seen a lot of Tyler Atkinson. My 2 years at Milton, we played Grayson in the semifinals or the quarterfinals, so I've seen the young man up and close. Then I got opportunity to coach in the Navy All-American game, which he played in this year. So there's another opportunity that you get to see him closer because he was on my team doing practice. So you get to see him run around. And he has a fast twitch that I haven't seen in a long time in the inside linebacker. And he just, I mean, he definitely the definition of see ball, go get ball, and that's what you love to see out of these young men. And he's one of the best that I've seen at that position, especially at the young age when he exploded on the scene as a freshman.
Yeah, I'm curious. Would you mind talking more about that? Because whether it be Atkins or somebody else, when you're coaching an all-star game or when you're, kind of facing these players and they're playing on another team, as someone who is a high-level athlete yourself, what else do you notice? What else stands out to you when you see the sort of high-level athlete that could go to a place like Georgia that we talk about on shows like this? What are those like little characteristics that just sort of give it away of, oh, this is a guy going about the business of high school football in a completely different way than sort of a more normal or kind of, average athlete might be doing?
Yes, the 2 years that we actually played against Grayson, he pops on tape. I mean, he's a guy that is on every play. He's around the football. And you could tell just by the way he plays that he just loves football. I got an opportunity to meet him. One time he was coming to a training after my sessions at the bubble, and he just loves the work parts of it. Didn't get the opportunity to watch him up close at the Navy All-American game. You just see how the young man practice and he prepares to play football. He's one speed. He's full speed the whole time. And you can't, that's one of the things that you can't teach. Some people just, go with the motion because they know they're good. This young man was just flying around the whole time. And the coaching staff asked a question to all the coaches. And it was like, if you can name one player that is going to be a Sunday player, who would it be? And it was consensus that Tyler Atkinson is a player. If everything stays healthy, he stays healthy, everything goes right, he's a Sunday player.
Really interesting stuff. We talked about Auburn a little bit before you joined us and what could be a tough game for Georgia here this year. And Terrence, what I was thinking about a little bit is, almost certainly the SEC is about to go to a 9-game conference schedule. When it does, I mean, it's almost a guarantee that Georgia will not be playing at Auburn every other year, won't be playing Auburn every year anymore. Deep South's oldest rivalry will kind of take on a little bit of a different feel at that point in time. And I think when that happens, something will have been lost for college football. But I think it's also interesting, since Georgia has dominated the series as much as it has, winning every game since the 2017 SEC championship, I think it's almost now become a little easy to forget the fact that Auburn, back when you were playing, back when I was kind of, my formative years, kind of becoming a big fan of Georgia football and someone who followed this very closely, that you always treated at Jordan-Hare Stadium, at Auburn, as one of the toughest games that you would play. And I do think I think it has the potential anyway to feel like a tough road game for Georgia again this year. So as someone who, certainly saw your team, I believe you were injured that day, but saw your team get, a big win there in 2002, but also experienced the intensity of that rivalry during your, sort of playing age. Like, what does it mean to play at a place like Auburn, and how seriously should Georgia fans kind of take the warning from Kirby Smart of a year ago of all of these road environments, whether it's at Tennessee, at Auburn, places that Georgia will face this year, all of these road environments are incredibly tough.
It is. And I was having a conversation about being a player, being a reporter, and being a fan. And I respect everyone's opinion, but until you walk into Jordan-Hare Stadium as a player and play that game, and I don't care how good or bad you think Auburn is, that is one of the most intensified, I ain't gonna say terrifying, but that's a place that you want to play. It is a great football environment. We as players, and I know fans and everyone understands the history of these two teams. And I don't care if we've beaten them, and I let Takeo know about this all the time, that we've beaten them the last 22 out of the last 23 times, if I'm not mistaken. But that game is still as competitive. We want to win that game badly because there are so many Georgia players on Auburn's team, and Auburn is so close to the line. It's one of the better rivalry games that we have, even though Georgia has dominated this series of late. So just let everyone, as a player that was played in this rivalry and still believes in this rivalry, I don't care what the records are, how we've dominated. This is a very tough environment to go play in. Doesn't matter the records.
Let me also correct myself because I believe I just made a mistake. Had the SEC kept an 8-team rotation, then Georgia and Auburn probably would not play anymore. Going to a 9-game slate, which I believe they're about to do, I do think that still creates room for Auburn to be one of Georgia's 3 permanent opponents. I believe it probably will be, along with Florida, and I think the reporting has been Kentucky. So, Terrence, let me also correct myself on this in that in a 9-game conference schedule world, Georgia probably would be able to maintain its permanent opponent status with Auburn. And if that is what happens, I think that would be good news, just simply because, that's one of the teams, for all the reasons you just mentioned, for all the history that exists, Georgia should be playing every year. So in a 9-game conference schedule world, I do believe there is space for Georgia and Auburn to play each other every year. I believe I misspoke earlier when I said that. So let me at least make sure I take some time to sort of clear all that up.
Yes, and I would hope, even in an 8-game series, there's a lot of smart people out there. And having this game every year just means a lot for the 2 programs. I would definitely love for Georgia and Auburn to continue this rivalry. So hopefully they do. And it doesn't matter if it's an 8-game series or it's a 9. You have to continue to play this rivalry. It means that much.
Let me finish with this here, if you don't mind, final topic, which is I believe there is a pretty good chance today we could hear that there's a change coming to the college football playoff for the upcoming season. A year ago, the top 4 seeds were given to the top 4 conference championship winners, which meant that teams that lost the conference championship game, for instance, Texas, perhaps had a little bit of an easier path to get to the Final Four because of who they were playing and the fact that you weren't going with what they call kind of straight seeding, where the number 1 team is the number 1 seed, the number 2 team is the number 2 seed. You had kind of a convoluted situation where you may be ranked 3rd, but you're seeded 5th, or something along those lines. It seems like there may be a move to go to what they're going to call a kind of a straight seeding model here for 2025. Terrence, there's also talk that in the very near future we may get a commitment to move from a 16-team playoff. This is after the plans already exist to go to a kind of a 14-team playoff. So kind of a big picture question here, whether it be related to the seeding, which we think is going to change today, or the future expansion beyond 12. We just got to 12. Now we're already talking about moving to 14 and 16. What do you think the college football playoff should be?
That's one of the things that I had an issue with last year was the seeding. I do believe, and I've always preached, if you won your conference, you should be in the playoffs. But my just thought, if once we determine if it's 12 or it's 14, then you reseed the 14 that we know that would be in the playoff. So those teams that got an automatic bid shouldn't be over a team that's ranked 2 or 3 in the polls, but just didn't win their conference, but has a better strength of schedule, just had a better football team, just in a different conference. You shouldn't be seeded higher than them. So I like the reseeding of, once we figure out who the top 12 or 14 teams are, then you reseed those into the appropriate spots. But who knows what college football is going to do. At the end of the day, I still totally believe it's about money making and trying to make as much money as possible. I like the expansion. I like 12. I still like 12. I just thought there's not 16 teams that has a legitimate chance to win a national championship. Maybe there's not 12, but that really gives more schools an opportunity to say, at least we got a chance. And I still go back to Florida State. 2 years ago, they should have had an opportunity to play. They won every game. So they would have been in the top 12, even though they lost their starting quarterback. They would have had an opportunity to go lose or win. So I really like it to be 12 was really nice this year, but I just wish they'd have reseeded some of the teams to make it a fair competition to the teams that actually earned a higher seed.
I think that's really interesting, Terrence, and I appreciate your thoughts on that. Also appreciate you being here on the program today. And you mentioned kind of dead week coming up next week for high school football coaches, and then summer workouts and things of that nature after that. I also know that means personal workouts for you with a lot of your clients with the Terrence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy. So for people who kind of want to jump in and be ready for the fall and just get better at catching the football, whether it be wide receivers, tight ends, whatever else, how can they get in touch with the Terrence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy?
Yes, you can reach me on all social media platforms at Terrence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy.
Terrence, I appreciate your time. Enjoy the holiday weekend coming up and then the week off after that. Of course, we'll look forward to our chance to catch up with you very soon here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp.
Thank you.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
I love Terrence. I also love our high school football coaches. Many of them get a chance to tune in. It's also kind of fun this time of year, perhaps more of those tuning in than maybe, sometimes during the busy school year. A lot of those folks kind of getting out of school, maybe watching live, whereas sometimes they're listening after the fact. I think one of the most important things we have are our football coaches that are kind of dedicating time to make young men better versions of themselves. So for all of you getting ready to enjoy Dead Week next week and some time off, enjoy that. And then, of course, get all those guys ready to go in the summertime workouts after that, because August and high school football, all of that's going to be here before you know it. And man, oh man, am I already so ready for that. Let me also say one more thing that Terrence was saying, then we'll kind of dive in and go cruising around the SEC with Royal Caribbean. I think it's weird sometimes when sometimes you get exactly what you want, and then you realize, oh man, what I thought I wanted was not exactly what it's cracked up to be. I would say for me, playoff expansion is an example of that. Over the course of like the last decade plus, I would consider myself somebody that's sort of pro college football playoff. Like, I remember the entire time of the BCS era, I always dreamed of maybe one day college football could have a playoff. Maybe one day we could kind of decide this on the field. It seemed like a pipe dream at the time because that had been so against the history of college football, and then finally we got it. And honestly, I think that the inclusion of college football playoff into the sport starting in 2014, I think it made the sport better. I really enjoyed the college football playoff era. And I do happen to think that there are more than 4 national championship contenders in most years. And so therefore, I was sort of okay with the playoff being more expanded. I like playoff games. More playoff games seem like they'd be better. I was really excited about going to a 12-team playoff a year ago. And I know this kind of comes across as sour grapes because Georgia lost. Maybe that's all this is. I don't think it is, but maybe it is. I don't know. But the point is, after getting what I wanted, an expanded playoff, going to 12, I like college football debates. A larger playoff creates more space for debate. I kind of hated last year. I really did. I kind of hated it. And I'm not that excited about the college football playoff debate for this upcoming. I'm excited about the season, but I'm not that excited about the college football playoff debate. And I don't know what you do about this. I really don't. I mean, as I've spoken about over and over again, when you look at the way in which the college football playoff is sort of sucking all the air out of the room, the elimination of conference championship games eventually, like what a mistake that would be to trade something. And I've said this before, this is not, something I haven't repeatedly stated, but to trade something that everybody seems to love, the SEC championship, for something like a additional first-round playoff game that just does seem to have a lid on it when it comes to fan popularity. These first-round playoff games a year ago were just not as popular as I thought they would be. And I don't know that I fully understand all the reasons why. I really don't. But I would say a year ago, I got exactly what I wanted, a bigger playoff. And guess what? It was not everything I thought it'd be cracked up to be. And if Georgia won the national championship, would my feelings be different? I am certainly self-aware enough to know that maybe I'd feel a little bit different. But I don't think all of this that I'm saying now is colored simply by the distaste I have for the fact that Georgia got eliminated sooner than I thought they would be. We'll talk more about that in a little bit coming up in a moment. Prior to that, let's get ready to go cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And while I have mixed emotions about the college football playoff right now, I have no mixed emotions when it comes to our friends at Royal Caribbean and all the excitement that we have about the debut of a brand new icon class of ship with Star of the Seas later on this summer. And obviously, when people think about an icon class of ship, they think about the sheer size of it all. But the thing you got to understand is it's the ways in which Royal Caribbean really creatively uses the space on the ship that I think is some of the most fun, including the hideaway area on the back of Icon of the Seas. Star of the Seas will be similar. This is sort of like, kind of an adults-only area that's kind of quiet. You have the infinity edge pools. You have the wonderful view, whether it either looks out over the port that you might be visiting or the expanse of the ocean when you're on the sea. And it's just a really fun kind of hangout, relaxation opportunity. And, I think that one of the things that Royal Caribbean does really well is they create spaces for adults, which kind of gives the adults something to do. They create spaces for the kids, and that kind of gives the kids something to do. They create spaces for teenagers. The point is, anytime you create a really attractive space, you're kind of pulling people into that space, which makes the other areas of the ship easier to navigate, more enjoyable. And when you really maximize the space on the ship with the Aquadome and things like that, you're just creating a lot of room for people of all ages to have the kind of fun they want to have. Royal Caribbean is just so good at that. Star of the Seas is going to be the kind of the next level of that when it debuts later on this August. I want you to reach out to our friend Jessica Slater, travel advisor, specially selected for us by Royal Caribbean for all of our Royal Caribbean cruise vacation needs. You can give her a call, 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. You can also email her, jslater@dreamvacations.com. She'll get you ready for a great Royal Caribbean cruise vacation for this summer, early 2026, perhaps sometime around this fall. She'll get you ready for all of that. Now, let's get ready to go cruise around the SEC right now, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And we're kind of in that list time of year. And I saw another list from our friends at 24/7 Sports, kind of looking at the coaches around college football that were under the most pressure here for the upcoming season. Couldn't help but notice how many of those guys are also SEC coaches. I saw Sam Pittman on there. I saw Brent Venables on there. Brian Kelly. We talked to Hugh Freeze off the top. His penchant for sort of saying the wrong thing, I think, kind of keeps him in hot water with his fans a little bit. Now, let me just say a couple of things here. First of all, there is no pressure on Sam Pittman. Y'all, Sam Pittman, he's already proven a point. He became head coach at Arkansas, kind of made them into far more of a winner than he was before he got there, had kind of the big breakout season in 2021, and has sort of existed in kind of favorite son status ever since then. Here's what I can promise you. The moment they tap him on the shoulder and say, we're ready to go in a different direction as a head coach, Sam Pittman's going to be, that's fine. 2 fingers in the air. He's going to go back to his home right there in the Lake of the Ozarks. He's going to play his horses. He's going to do stuff like that. And he's not going to worry anything at all about any of this. And a lot of people are like, ooh, maybe one day he'll come back to Georgia or something like that. I don't believe Sam Pittman's ever coaching again after he's done with Arkansas. I think he's going to enjoy some well-earned retirement. Something strikes me as Sam Pittman being the kind of guy that sort of knows how to enjoy his leisure time. And if this is the last year for Pittman in Arkansas, I think he'll be more than happy to ride off into the sunset and enjoy every minute of a beautiful lake house and a state that he loves around people who love him. Pittman may or may not win enough games to stay employed here this year, but there ain't no pressure on Sam Pittman. Pittman's going to be happy with the outcome no matter what it is, I'm pretty sure. Other SEC coaches not quite so sure about that. As I mentioned, Brent Venables, I think, an interesting name on a list like this from Oklahoma. Obviously, Oklahoma has been the most aggressive team in the transfer portal, trying to address issues where they were deficient a year ago. And a lot of people, as we've told you, have kind of bought into this being a reason for major improvement for the Sooners here this year. I'm not anti-Oklahoma. Frankly, Oklahoma doesn't make me feel one thing at all. Don't have enough history with them to do so. But I do think that the people who've tried to, and we've joked before about the offseason national champions, Oklahoma kind of feels like that. For the people who've tried to make this into a thing, I think there's a little bit of a misunderstanding here. That, you know, if you need a new quarterback badly, then you must be kind of a bad team. And that's kind of what we think Oklahoma is, that the transfer of Matier and his offensive coordinator and getting Jay Knott, I don't know this is going to have the dramatic change in fortunes for Oklahoma that some are now convinced that it might. We just don't really buy into that too much. And when it comes to Hugh Freeze, we've talked enough about him. Guys like Brian Kelly, you could put Billy Napier on a list like this, perhaps. I would say Mark Stoops from Kentucky belongs on this list. I would say quietly watch Mike. I'm the only one who says this, which means I'm probably wrong. But I'll also in year 2 tell you to watch Mike Elko. I think Elko's a good coach. I really do. I think he's been dealt kind of a tough hand there at College Station. But the least happy fans in the SEC right now are Texas A&M fans. They're just furious about everything. They're kind of underachieving in all the sports, or at least not exceeding expectations in any of them. I think he could face the brunt of that. The point is, here's this. We have kind of had peacetime around the SEC for a little while now. We haven't had a whole bunch of coaching changes. It seems like a lot of programs are sort of afraid to pay buyouts because that's just less money they have to spend on NIL. It sort of seems like we've had some of that going on. My prediction is we're about to have a very tumultuous year in the SEC. I forgot the number I gave the other day, but I don't think 5 is a crazy number. I think we could have a lot of coaching changes after this year in the SEC. Some of this may be guys who try to leap for greener pastures. Stoops tried to do that at Kentucky. Some of this could just be straight firings. Some of this could be, sort of a weird amalgam of those things. But I just think we could be heading for kind of the sort of season this fall that leads to a very tumultuous offseason heading into 2026 in the SEC. I'd keep your eye on that. All right, let's talk Matt Rhule for a moment, Nebraska coach. Almost everything that Rhule says, I hate. It's amazing to find someone whose opinions about everything are just so diametrically opposed to mine. And I just told you a moment ago that I wanted an expanded playoff. I wanted 12. I've said before I have a tolerance for 16. But I've also said I can't have anything beyond that. And I also just admitted that while I wanted an expanded playoff, once I got one, it wasn't quite as good as I thought it would be for reasons other than just Georgia's earlier than expected exit. The point is that the thing that has made college football special is the nature of its regular season. And I never exactly bought the argument, well, every week is a playoff and every week in the college football season is a chance for somebody to be eliminated. I've never felt like that was quite true, the way in which some people sort of use that as true. But the one thing that all of us who love college football will all agree universally is that college football has the most special regular season. And if you're not careful, you can ruin that. And what a guy like Matt Rhule has said, which would obviously, never happen. The point is not this may happen. The point is this is the way that people talk in this day and age. Matt Rhule says he wants to go to a 40-team college football playoff. At least that's what he was quoted as saying by our friends at On3. Wants to go to a 40-team college football playoff. And college football is never doing this. It's ludicrous to assume that it would. But I still think it's somewhat noteworthy that a coach of a program like Nebraska, which in my lifetime, you can make a case that when I was a child, Nebraska was like the program. They may have been the top of the charts, certainly among the very best for much of my lifetime into my teenage years. So it's not some, fly-by-night program that Rhule coaches, even though Nebraska is a shadow of what it used to be. This is what's supposed to be one of the flagship programs. And you've got this sort of radical thinker as a head coach for one of the most traditional programs there is. I would say that's a little bit scary for me. And I put this on X yesterday, and I'll restate it here. What bothers me a little bit about the current arms race between the SEC and the Big Ten, I am a Southerner and proudly so I'm always going to support the SEC for that reason. But also, in addition to that, the thing about the SEC, I would say, is that this is a league that has figures in the league, administrators, coaches, things like that, who sort of feel like college football lifers. They're not looking to bounce to another job. They're not looking to find an escape hatch to get out of college football. These are coaches, ADs, even Greg Sankey, who are sort of in it one way or another for college athletics seemingly forever. Just sort of feels like that's what this league is. The Big Ten, by comparison, is completely different, and I do think we should notice this. For instance, the commissioner, Kevin Warren, who orchestrated the complete implosion of the Pac-12 to bring in USC, UCLA, eventually Oregon, Washington, at the expense of more chaos than college athletics had ever seen at any one time. Shortly after he did that, he just bounced out of college athletics, and now he's the president of the Chicago Bears. Seemingly that was a dream job for him, working in the NFL, not running a league such as the Big Ten. And when you've got a short-term thinker, someone who does not have any real skin in the game of college athletics' future, making these sort of decisions, knowing he won't have to live with the repercussions one way or another, I'd say that's pretty dangerous. Similar thing for like Jim Harbaugh. Harbaugh is Michigan's Kirby Smart. You know what I'm saying? Like favorite son, alumnus, coming back to restore his program to glory. And just like it worked for Kirby Smart, no matter whether you like it or not, it's true. It also worked for Jim Harbaugh at Michigan. He led him to a national championship. But he didn't want to be the coach there. He only came to Michigan to begin with because apparently he was mad at his, employer in San Francisco. And the chance he had, the first opportunity he had to go back to the NFL, he took it. This was a guy who, beloved by Michigan, willing to coach at his alma mater, but not willing to stay there. This is the sort of person that there seems to be a lot of in the Big Ten, someone who's only in college football until the NFL comes calling, or in Harbaugh's case, calling again. And Matt Rhule sort of feels like a similar figure to me. Rhule was an embarrassing failure as an NFL head coach, kicked out of the league because of that. And yet his sort of thinking and sensibilities seem to reflect someone who's dying to get back into the NFL, the sort of wannabe to be, that could be accepted at that level, or someone that just doesn't like college football very much, but just sort of has the job because it kind of feels like a good gig until something better comes along. It feels like there's a lot of that in the Big Ten, and this is why the Big Ten must lose. By the way, speaking of the Big Ten, one more thing here real quick. Trampling tradition left and right. Looks like we haven't talked about this yet. It's been out there for a while. It seems like USC wants to do away with the Notre Dame-USC rivalry. Now, total honesty, this rivalry doesn't mean very much to me because, as I said before, I'm a Southerner. I'm less interested in things that take place outside the South. So the Notre Dame-USC rivalry doesn't mean a ton to me, but it is something that has meant a lot to a lot of people in different regions of the country, Midwest, Far West. They have liked this rivalry. It's been a really big deal. So the fact that USC would just kick it to the curb because I think it's been cited travel concerns. They're traveling 1,000 miles to go play Big Ten games. Now they can't travel a little bit to go play Notre Dame in South Bend. So obviously, we're always concerned anytime traditions go away. I'll also say this. We've talked a little bit recently about, TV ratings, things like that. Playoff ratings, for instance. Have you noticed that Notre Dame does not seem to be quite as big a deal as it used to be? That in our lifetimes, we can say Notre Dame is overrated on the field, and we can say that, propped up by the media. We can say a lot of things, and believe me, we did. We can say all kinds of stuff, but all that kind of stuff. But the one thing you could not deny was Notre Dame had this sort of national following that was going to kind of always give them sort of special status. Own TV network on NBC, free gift into the playoff. But just notice, you can Google this. Notice how few of the highest rated games in college football this past season involved Notre Dame. And for a college football playoff that, both in terms of fan reception, TV ratings, a little bit of a flop, just notice the heavy presence of Notre Dame wasn't quite the savior for the expanded playoff, the way that I think that some people kind of thought it might be in the past. And once again, this may come across like sour grapes because Notre Dame did beat Georgia. I still think what I'm saying is true. And also, if a program like USC, who has a yearly date with Notre Dame, no longer sees value in maintaining that date, some of that is because Lincoln Riley just doesn't like playing tough games. We know that's true. We have all kinds of reasons to suspect that. But also some of this could be, as I said before, a little bit of a downgrade in the value of Notre Dame as a brand. That may feel like something that was true for your grandfather that's not quite as true for you. Worth monitoring that. We'll make that cruising around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Now, that said, we'll turn our attention fully back here to the Georgia Bulldogs, away from football for a second, but I do think this is really big news. Georgia baseball announced something good yesterday. Wes Johnson's going to be sticking around, not taking any coaching opening, including the one at Mississippi State, extended here at Georgia, announced as Georgia obviously losing the SEC tournament. No big deal there. Getting ready to be what we believe will be a national seed with a chance to host both an NCAA regional and a super regional here coming up. And look, when we think about kind of a football-centric mindset, a program like Mississippi State, for instance, and by the way, there are also other SEC jobs that are rumored to potentially come available here too, that, in the case of a Mississippi State, we don't think of them being Georgia's equal as a program. In football, that's certainly the case. In baseball, I'm not quite so sure. If you look at some of like the attendance rankings and things like that, I believe I have this number right. The 10 highest attended on-campus games in college baseball history all took place in Starkville. And I want to say it's like 23 of 25. Is it Dooley Noble Stadium, the name of the place? Huge atmosphere, big crowds, big support. Georgia saw experiences a few years ago when Ron Polk left Georgia to go back to Mississippi State, that this is kind of a destination job for many people, but apparently not for Wes Johnson, choosing to stick around here at UGA. Now, I'll be honest, like anybody else, I don't know if Georgia's going to the College World Series this year or not. They're certainly going to be among the favorites to do so. Whether or not they have enough pitching to get that done, or I think it remains to be seen. But I've seen enough through 2 years. As long as Johnson's here, he's managed the transfer portal very well. He's a little bit of he'll be the first to tell you, a little bit of a baseball nerd. So from analytics perspectives and things like that, he kind of knows exactly what he's looking for. I think as long as Johnson's here, Georgia's competitive. I really do. And this extension lets you believe that he's going to be sticking around for quite some time. I think that is very, very good news, and certainly a welcome way to start what we hope is a long run through the postseason here for UGA. And as we get ready to wrap up here today, there you go. Let's get me back there on the desk. As you get ready to wrap up here today, I want to give you a golden shoe. Question being asked of me, and certainly a fair one to address here. Obviously, going back now a couple of months ago, we had our golden shoe bracket challenge. Do you remember that? And the winner, and I believe we had a tie at the top, have not yet been on the show. So our buddy William Billy Ray, who I believe must be among the winners. Honestly, I don't remember because I don't remember anything. But he says, when will you have the DawgNation Bracket Challenge winners on the show? He says, asking for a friend. I say that's a very fair question. So what do you say we get ready to try to do this next week, post-Memorial Day? We'll bring on everybody, for that. Also, the Golden Shoe stickers, they're going to go out in the mail next week, too. Some of y'all didn't think I was going to do it, but next week it happens. Stand by to see, but I believe that's going to be the case. Lousy, stinking Gators. How about a Gator hater updater? 1,656 days. That's how long it's been since Florida's beaten Georgia. That is our Gator hater updater. By the way, speaking of next week, I'll also remind you here, we're kind of coming in on that Memorial Day weekend in observance of Memorial Day. We'll be off on Monday to give our staff here a chance to kind of be with their family and friends. No recorded show or anything for Monday, but kind of back live as normal Tuesday, the rest of the week after that. And, of course, here again tomorrow as well, DawgNation Daily presented by Merriweather and Tharp. We will look forward to talking to you then. And on video, time now for our R.S. Andrews cool down. R.S. Andrews, when you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs, they show up on time, doing the work that's promised, the price is promised. You can trust R.S. Andrews and all that. I love my guy, Dari Payro. I've not seen Dari in a little while, but there are rumblings and grumblings of a little lunch date for Dari and me here coming up very soon, and I'm always really excited about that. All right. By the way, our YouTube folks, typically the food talk is the domain of our Facebook friends, but on YouTube, you got some of that going on here today. Let's see what else. Jonathan Aaron mentioning that Jim Irsay does pass away, the Indianapolis Colts owner. I did see a message from Peyton Manning on social media about that. Obviously, really sad. That's a guy that was, certainly we've joked before that if you're rich enough, you get to be eccentric. I would say that Irsay rose to the level of being a among the more eccentric NFL owners. I don't think it's unfair to say it that way. But boy, a guy who was in love with his team, and a lot of people who were a part of that Colts organization also loved Irsay. And a lot of the people of Indiana really loved him too. So certainly sad news here today. Just 65 years old, I guess that's the case. So very, very sad news. Jim Irsay, the owner of the Indianapolis Colts, does pass away here. Let us see what else. Paul Moon on YouTube kind of mentioning the crossover or not between Georgia's player evaluations and the recruiting rankings. It is interesting, I mean, I have a lot of respect for those who do the national recruiting rankings. I've said before, when it comes to an individual player, I don't care about anyone's opinion. There are plenty of people who know way more about football than I do. Plenty of people. It doesn't bother me at all to say that. Plenty of people. But even for the people who know more about football than I do, I don't care about their opinion about an individual player because it's all a 50-50 proposition. All of it is. I always go back to the Matthew McConaughey line from The Wolf of Wall Street. I don't care if you're Warren Buffett or Jimmy Buffett. When it comes to a specific stock, no one knows if it's going to go up or down. I just don't believe that. And I think this is not investment advice, but I do think that people's investment strategy should reflect individual assets going up or down. Is not an easy thing to predict, even ones that have a tendency to mostly only go up. That kind of thing is just not easy to predict. Individual players the same way. However, what I do believe that smart people are capable of doing is they are capable of putting players into categories. And I have watched them do it. And if you are a sort of a scout's eye type person, you can look at a big old field at the opening or, one of these, camps that takes place, and you can say, there's your 5 stars, there's your 4 stars, and here's your guys that are rated less than that. That these guys are really good at putting players into categories. And I think it's interesting that for the most part, they kind of get it right. NFL draft shows that, at least more so than chance would dictate. The first round picks about half the time are kind of 5-star type players, very high 4-star type players. And so therefore, it would stand to reason, since the recruiting industry gets more of this right than they're oftentimes given credit for, that a program like Georgia, the recruits it's going to pursue the most heavily just so happen to oftentimes be recruits that also have the very high recruiting rankings. There's also some confirmation bias in this, that Georgia's presence chasing down a recruit will cause their recruiting ranking to elevate. People used to talk about the Bama bump. The Bama bump was real because it would stand to reason that if Bama was going after a player, then and you didn't think of him as among the best recruits, you probably were wrong. And you probably did need to reevaluate, because Alabama mostly got this stuff right for a long time during the Nick Saban era. That's just the way that was. Yet, all of that said, it is also interesting to me, and I do think there are plenty of examples of this. Georgia doesn't reveal much of its thinking about recruiting because there's just nothing to gain from them by doing that. But we do have pretty significant evidence where sometimes a player who is not highly rated, they want just as bad as the guy who is highly rated. And there are certain instances when they wanted some of those guys even more. Now, when other programs say this, it's a little bit of a cop-out of, I don't care about the recruiting rankings. We just want to trust our own evaluations. That's the sort of last refuge of the sort of program that can't get recruits that have very high recruiting rankings. But we've seen now for darn near a decade, Georgia pretty much gets whoever it wants. And sometimes who it wants is the 5-star. There are other times, though, when Georgia has wanted so-and-so just as bad as somebody who was far more highly rated as a recruit. Like, as tried as it seems, Georgia really does trust its evaluations. And they're kind of okay when those evaluations are the same as the industry at large, and they're kind of okay when they're different. Like, that's what trusting your evaluation really would be. And I do think Georgia really trusts its evaluations. Let us see what else. G. Grace mentioning some of the things from Irsay's past. Yeah, that was. I think it's fair to say some hard living at times. Once again, trying to be as fair as possible. I think that's probably the case. Colby Strotter says, you mentioned Georgia's third down defense being 17th in the nation. Do you believe that reflects lower level defense across the board in college football? Not necessarily. I don't know that I know what to necessarily ascribe that to necessarily. I mean, I do think this is that I don't know this would be a reflection in third down defense necessarily, but we do see depressed offensive stats across the sport, and almost all of that is clock rules. Or I shouldn't say almost all of that. We saw a trend down for offense for a couple of years, roughly around the time post-pandemic defense made a little bit of a resurgence in college football. Just so happens that was also 2 national championships for Georgia. And then after that, 2023 and 2024, we've also seen, I would say, across the sport, additional downturn in offense. And that I would attribute to clock rules. The 2021, 2022 defensive resurgence, to me, is probably just the sort of cyclical nature of complex systems. 2023, 2024, I think you can draw a straight line towards clock rules. So I don't know, to sort of kind of circle back to your premise, I don't know that every successful defensive stat that we see is necessarily attributable to defenses being better. Some of it's just attributable to offenses having limited scoring opportunities compared to the past. But I don't know that I'd put third down in that category. Gary Roach says, have you heard from Davin Bellamy, or how's he doing? So Davin has been pretty busy with his day job. The honest truth is I have not, like Davin and I exchanged stuff a couple of weeks ago, have not caught up since then, but I do hope to hear from him soon. I think that he has just been really busy with what he's doing there in D.C. and, kind of trying to figure a lot of that kind of stuff out. And, this happens, right? I mean, our contributors, we're thankful to have them, but they all have either businesses or day jobs or things like that. And sometimes they just get busy. And so I think that Davin's kind of going through some of that right now. Nothing bad or anything like that. He's just busy. So we'll catch up with Davin again here, I think, really soon and have him back on the show. Thanks for asking. Paul Moon. We did have Davin was our post-game co-host, but he was also our weekly guest for us on DawgNation Daily. We certainly believe Davin's going to be back on doing a bunch of stuff with us, but right now he's kind of taking care of some other business. Garrison Tucker says, what tight end has more touchdowns this season? Is it Lucky or Delp? So I have said this before, that I have been very bullish on Oscar Delp. I remain so. I think that Delp is one of Georgia's most important players this year. And one of my bold predictions back in the winter was I think that Delp could be an all-SEC tight end here this year. I have also openly acknowledged that when I was touting Delp as much as I was, I don't think I was giving proper consideration to Lawson Lucky. I don't. Based on what we heard during spring practice, what we kind of saw on G-Day, Lawson Lucky is going to be a more important part of this offense, I believe, than I originally gave him credit for being. I do think he's going to be one of Georgia's go-to receivers. So this is a long answer to a short question. If you would have asked me back in February who has more touchdowns between Delp and Lucky, I would have very quickly and easily answered, I think it's Oscar Delp. I think he and Gunnar Stockton are going to have a really strong connection with each other. That's what I would have said. That may still turn out to be true. But I am far more willing to consider, maybe it is Lucky based on the way in which he was used at G-Day. Only had a couple of catches, but I still thought, just the look of things, he's going to be a big part of the offense. And, Georgia's got a handful of pass catchers who I think kind of function in kind of a similar way. I would say Colby Young, Noah Thomas, and Lawson Lucky are sort of similar figures. But that doesn't mean they're going to necessarily negate each other. They may all function. I mean, it may be true that for a quarterback who's pretty comfortable, but still kind of going through this for the very first time. There's no such thing as too many very large targets with wide wingspans and very, very large, what's the plural of catch radiuses or radii, whatever you want to say, very large catch radius type guys. For Gunnar Stockton this year, he may say, hey, I can't get enough of those guys. So Noah Thomas, pretty wide range of places he can catch a football. Good for him. Colby, Lawson Lucky the same way. So my answer is no longer as emphatic an Oscar Delp as it once would have been. It may end up being Lawson Lucky. Let us see what else. Randy Hall also mentioning Jaden Riddell. Here's what I'll tell you about Riddell. I heard this point blank from somebody who is a lot closer to this than I am, who knows far better than I do. I heard point blank that Jaden Riddell was one of the sort of eye-opening guys during the winter workouts. Now, you may say, well, what does that mean? I'll confess I don't really know. You know what I'm saying? Georgia's clearly going to play 2 tight ends a lot. Are they going to play 3? Are they going to be rotating? What does that mean for Riddell on the field this fall? I honestly don't know. But I did hear this, as I like to say, from somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody, that Riddell really opened some eyes during some of those winter workouts. And, I'll let your imagination wander as to what that might have meant for him then or what it could mean for him this fall. But I did hear that. Let us see what else. UJ Marine says, if I was Bobo, I'd go 12 personnel and force defenses to go 3 linebackers. If they do, I'll take Lucky and walk him out, and then they decide you're going to play me with you're going to play your tight end with a linebacker. Yeah, so I think that's interesting. I do think that Georgia will go with the 2 tight end sets a lot, and like a lot of NFL teams, they'll go to that looking to throw out of it. It's amazing how frequently NFL teams go to big personnel and then throw out of the big package because, as you say, it puts defenses in conflict. Now, with Georgia's tight ends, and given the sort of high-level teams you want to play, and Georgia's the same way, star, or whatever teams call its nickelback, is sneaky one of the most important positions on the field because what you're really looking for is not the linebacker that can work in pass coverage. What you're really looking for is the defensive back that can step up and play the run. That's why someone like Janelle Aguero is important to Georgia. You got to have the guy who can run, but also, tips the scales at like 202, 203, 205 if you could get it. You want the 200-pound defensive back, and that is not easy to find. Not somebody because, you've obviously got to be able to run. And you've got these, knucklehead coaches that are trying to exploit you, Heupel, Kiffin. They're just looking for weaknesses in the middle of the field, so you can't be that. But at the same time, you can't get put into the stands every time, somebody steps up and lays a block on you. So I think the point you're making is kind of what Georgia likes to do, put big personnel in the field and put defenses into conflict. I think the response the best teams will have to that, though, is not so much – let's just keep 3 linebackers in the field as much as it is, you got to have what you hope a Janelle Aguero can be, or, what we've certainly seen Georgia have in the past. Tyke Smith was really good this a couple of years ago. Stout enough that you don't have to come off the field in running plays. Because here's the thing, and this is getting into the weeds, but like what you can't be doing as a defense is constantly running guys in and out of the game based on what you think the opposing offense is going to do. Because, these guys don't let you substitute. I know that there was all kinds of gamesmanship with substitution and slow walking, some of this kind of stuff a year ago. But for the most part, the game is still offenses try to go fast, try to keep you from being able to sub. So therefore, better to get stuck on the field with a defensive back that can at least hold his own in the run game more so than the alternative, I think, probably. My opinion, anyway. Oh, by the way, speaking of condolences, and this is one that did hit me hard. George Wendt from Cheers fame passed away. I'm going to tell you right now, as a child, I loved Cheers. I would say that Cheers was the thing. And if you're younger, you may not even have any idea what this is. But honestly, you know, it's obviously more dated than like some of the shows like Friends or The Office that have been popular with people, you know, on streaming platforms in recent years. Cheers is more dated than that. It is. It's a very 80s era type show, although it extended into the 90s. So it's more dated than some of the sitcoms people have gone back and rediscovered. But as somebody who Thursday night NBC, I remember that so well. Cosby Show, Family Ties, Cheers at 9 p.m. And then it was like this always like rotating, like what the 9:30 show was always something different. It's like you had like three heavy hitters, and the 9:30 show was always something different. Like eventually the Different World kind of popped in there on that. I didn't probably watch that one quite as much, but Cosby, Family Ties, Cheers. And I used to always like when Cheers came on because Cosby and Family Ties were obviously more for families, more for, appropriate for young kids. Cheers, though, was fascinating to me. The idea of these people just sort of hung out in this bar all the time. That's a very different life to the one that I was living. And you just always think it was so interesting. Just this, like, to me, I was like, oh, this is what adults are like. Which is kind of a funny thing to consider that my first experience with adulthood was like Norm and Cliff and all the people from Cheers. But Cheers was awesome. And George Wendt was one of the best parts of that show. Super sad to have him gone. Super sad because like just somebody who was like, a lot of actors you don't think want to be kind of typecast in like just one thing. And Wendt did other things in his career, like the Saturday Night Live skit from a sketch is another thing he was very famous for. But in Wendt's case, when you're like that beloved of a character, I mean, you've got to be proud of that. I mean, he was, huge in that. I did not know that. Jason Sudeikis' uncle. I did not know that George Wendt was that. That's really interesting. Very, very interesting. I was a big fan of his work. Very funny. Just very easygoing. Billy Cloud says, give us an update on the linebackers. So I think that what you see for Georgia at linebacker is pretty similar to what you've seen in recent years, where you've got two established, guys we expect to kind of be treated as starter-like players in Raylan Wilson and C.J. Allen. Allen's going to get some love as a preseason Buckus Award guy. But just like we've kind of said in the past, and we would have once said this about both Wilson and Allen, Justin Williams and Chris Cole are going to be very hard to keep off the field. And they're going to still play that inside linebacker spot. But they're going to be very hard to keep off the field. In fact, when you think about, let's say we made a list of like the 5 most dynamic athletes. We're in list season. Who's to say we couldn't make our own lists? The 5 most dynamic athletes on the Georgia roster, for instance. There's a chance that Cole and Williams are both on that list. So this and linebacker are the 2 deepest positions on the field. I know that Georgia's done a lot to upgrade its wide receiver position. Maybe they'll be in this conversation, but for now, you got to say this and linebacker, tight end, deepest positions on the field. Georgia's got 4 who are about as good as anybody going to have anywhere. By the way, I think now it's sort of turned into just shouting out 80 shows on DawgNation.com. UGA Marine mentioning Airwolf. I always like Blue Thunder better than Airwolf. This is one of those things like, kind of back then you'd sometimes have like 2 somewhat similar shows. I guess Blue Thunder, I believe it's Roy Scheider from Jaws fame. Started off, I think, as a movie, then turned into a TV show. For whatever reason, I liked Blue Thunder better than Airwolf. Baruch Dog says he was from Boston, so he had a great connection with Cheers. Yeah. I mean, the very first time I went to Boston, I wanted to see the so-called Cheers bar. But the truth is, it kind of looks like it on the outside. It does look like it on the outside, but it does not look like it on the inside. I was kind of disappointed about that. It's kind of weird that it wouldn't look more like it. Maybe they've changed it now. So let me get some Facebook comments here for a moment. Hopefully Facebook has operated without interruption here today. Let us see what's going on here. On Facebook, just for a second. Ken Holcomb says, I think an all-around tight end, Lucky, may be better than Delp, though I didn't think so before last season. I'm going to now talk out of both sides of my mouth because I think based on the way in which that statement's worded, I think that you're more impressed with like the playmaking potential of Lucky, if I'm reading your comment correctly. And I'm telling you right now, I think that Oscar Delp is underrated as a playmaking tight end. That sometimes think about like the sort of grunt work tight end and the sort of glory tight end. I think that Oscar Delp's athleticism at tight end is probably underrated. I really do. I think that last year was a very weird year for Georgia. I think the human embodiment of some of that weirdness is Oscar Delp. It's just strange that he wasn't more a part of the offense. By the late portion of the season, he was playing much better or utilized better, however you want to say it. I think that Delp's playmaking potential is probably underrated. I do. I think that Lucky is a terrific athlete. In a lot of ways you may measure athleticism, Lucky may be superior to Delp. And he may end up being the better player too. It's certainly a possibility. I think that Delp is underrated though, at least based on current perception. Randy Hall also mentioning Jim Irsay. Yeah, we talked about that a good bit a little earlier. Tennille Calvino says, what's my Blizzard preference? I believe this is the, I don't normally give away free ads, but I will for this, the Dairy Queen treat. I like Oreo Blizzards. And let me just say this. Like I said, I don't give away free advertising, but I am going to mention Dairy Queen because I was thinking about this the other day. So I have a theory about certain things that is probably a misperception, but I believe this in my soul. There are things that, speaking of the 80s, there are things that used to taste great to me in the 80s that I swear on my life do not taste the same as they used to. And like, I'm not talking about like beef tallow. I don't know what that is. People talk about that kind of thing all the time. I have no idea what that is. That's not my thing. But just certain things that used to taste a certain way that I swear on my life do not taste as good as they used to. Now, people are going to come back and say, well, B, that's because you were a child and you had child taste buds, now you're an adult. The truth is, I still pretty much eat like a child, so I don't know that that's necessarily as true as you think it might be. But I'm not going to sort of name the specific things because I don't want to certainly slander venerable brands. But whether it be snacks that you buy at the supermarket or various restaurants that I used to just think were like delicacies. And I swear to you, they don't taste like they used to. They just don't taste the same. Dairy Queen ice cream is one of those things. Like I said, I don't give away free ads, but I will mention this. I think it tastes, it's one of the few things that I have had in my life since I was a child. To me, Dairy Queen ice cream tastes exactly like it did when I was a kid. Exactly like it did. The ice cream, like the chocolate syrup, all of that to me is exactly the same as it used to be. And I love that. I love that. Let's see what else. More on Facebook here just for a second. By the way, Bill Sanders and Johnny Prescott. Here's something else I believe about the 80s. 80s had great TV theme songs. And once again, as someone who was a child in the 80s, like a lot of times I would watch these shows and not really understand like what the content was about, but I always wanted the theme song. For instance, when I was a kid, on Friday nights, Dukes of Hazzard comes on at 9 p.m. And then at 10 p.m. on CBS, Dallas would come on. And Dallas had a banger of a theme song. And I'd always want to see that. And they showed the Texas Stadium and they did the ranch and all that kind of stuff. And then the show would start. I didn't get the content at all. and I just get bored with that pretty quick. But the theme song was amazing. Bill also mentioned like Magnum PI, Hill Street Blues. Loved Hill Street Blues. Oh my gosh! Like I said, I didn't get all like the, was that Stephen Bochco? That was the producer. I didn't get all the adult themes on that. Kind of a precursor to some of the sort of anti-hero type stuff that would be popular 2 decades later. But the theme song was amazing. Amazing. Yeah, Grady Darcy, the Miami Vice theme song. And I'll tell you, even that, because that sort of came on Friday nights after, like, say, Knight Rider. Knight Rider was on Fridays for a while. A-Team was on Fridays for a while. Not famous for being on Fridays, but it did move to Fridays eventually. And then Miami Vice would come on after that. And once again, that, is it Jan Hammer? Is that the guy's name? Is that the guy that did the Miami Vice theme? Is it Jan Hammer? That theme song it still hits. I mean, it's still, someone my, age and station, I can't say it slaps, but I think if I could say something slaps and if people still say that Miami Vice theme, I mean, you'll talk about, that is something else now. Brian Whitaker also mentioning Saved by the Bell. A little bit different era. That's more of a 90s thing. But I can promise you this, like, everybody my age just always had Saved by the Bell on in the afternoons. I don't know that anybody necessarily, I think it's one of those things probably loved more in retrospect. It's just one of those sort of ubiquitous things that you just sort of turned on and had on. It was always funny to me, like, for the most part, Saved by the Bell was kind of a silly show and silly on purpose. But every now and then they would do something like really dramatic. It's kind of like the old, afternoon special type thing. It was always funny to me when they got really dramatic, like the Zach and Kelly breakup, or Jesse's taking, drugs. Like every now and then, like, they would break with the silliness and like get really serious about something. Gary Holt mentioning Hogan's Heroes, which is before my time, but my grandfather loved that show. You talk about a show you could not do today. Like, that is a show you could not do today. But my grandfather used to love that show. All right. Anything else before we get ready to go? Brian Whitaker also likes the Oreo Blizzard. Yeah, I'm a big fan. Johnny Prescott mentioning the Magnum PI theme. That's another one of those themes. Like, I never really watched the show. I guess he was like a private detective in Hawaii. Is that right? And there was a guy with a helicopter, and Magnum had a nice car. I never got much past that, but good theme song, though. It got to be in the 90s. What people discovered is that no matter how cool the theme song was, when the theme song came on, people turned the channel. And so if you think about 90s era TV shows, there wasn't much of a theme song for a lot of those. Like, for instance, like, think about Seinfeld, probably the most popular show of the 90s. Like, Seinfeld had that little musical, like, rejoins, things like that. Did not have some long, theme song to begin the show. We kind of got away from that. And then eventually it just sort of came back because, I think that was, kind of artistic preference. But we actually went for a while, kind of post 80s, without a lot of theme songs. Like Garrison Tucker says, a prediction for Acuna's season when he returns. Here's what I'm going to tell you. I don't know, obviously. I'm a little concerned about Acuna, a little bit. I mean, he wasn't obviously lighting the world on fire pre-injury. So a little concerned with where he is. And I'll tell you this, I was also concerned with Strider the other night. Strider was not finding high velocity the other night. You are not going to blow 95 miles an hour past the sort of hitters you need Strider to get out for you. Now, maybe that's just a brief thing, but both these injury situations this year for the Braves have been pretty weird. So I don't know that I have, stat line predictions, but I'll acknowledge being a little concerned. Let's do one couple final. Baruch Dog mentioning Moonlighting is a great show. So that's a show that I knew about. And obviously, I guess Bruce Willis is in bad health, right? Am I right about that? Willis is in bad health. Like Moonlighting, very popular show, but I was too young to get, like the adult themes and something like that. Was it Sybil Shepherd? That's her name. The two characters going to get together. Trust me, however, years old I was in the 80s, I could have cared less about, the love affair between Bruce Willis and Sybil Shepherd's characters. But I do know the show. All right, we're getting ready to go. Randy Hall mentioning Wild Wild West. I mentioned my grandfather a minute ago. He's a huge Western guy. Is Wild Wild West the one that was like robots or something? Like that was like a weird show, right? Like what my grandfather really liked were what I think of as like the matinee cowboy stuff from like the old timey days. He liked that kind of thing. Sunset Carson and Gene Autry. He liked what I sort of think of as like matinee cowboy movies. Not like John Wayne or stuff from like the 60s and 70s. He had stuff from like way before. And he was big into all that. But I do know what Wild Wild West is, I think. It was a weird show, though, right? Like, they were like robots or something. Am I making that up? I feel like I might not be. DT, thank you for the kind words. Appreciate that. Senior Dog says that was the movie version. But I know oftentimes movies and TV shows are different. But the TV show, something was, it wasn't just like, hey, this is the Wild West. Something was weird about it, right? I don't quite remember that. That's another one of those shows I don't think I understood. Brian Whitaker, thanks for the kind words here. We're all getting ready to check out here. Ken Holcomb says that Strider has said he's trying to learn how to pitch instead of trying to blow it past people, save his arm for a long career. And that may be the case, Kent, and it may be true. But boy, this whole thing has just been weird with Strider. I get that. And I get the idea that you want to learn to pitch, and obviously, throwing 100 miles an hour sort of seems like an injury waiting to happen. I get all that too. I don't know that I take all that at face value, but I also don't have enough knowledge to say definitively that's not true. Something about this is causing bells to ring inside my head. Perhaps I'm wrong.
Show from the 60s, Wild Wild West,
Oh, there you go. So I knew something was weird about it. I don't feel like that show's probably for me. I don't think that show's probably for me. All right. All right, we got to get ready to go. Now everybody's talking about old-time TV shows, which, trust me, I could talk about all day long. I could go back and talk about all kinds of old TV shows. Because, listen, over the course of my lifetime, there are a few things I've done more than watch TV. I have watched a lot of TV. Way too much. But fun for sure. All right, y'all check out RS Andrews online, rsandrews.com, for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price is promised. You can trust them on that today. We got a big-time holiday weekend coming up. It also means hot weather's coming with it. Although it's like fantastic. When I was walking in today, a nice breeze. It was very, very comfortable. Don't get fooled by that. Hot weather's still coming, so get your AC ready for it. Find them online, rsandrews.com. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price is promised. So get your AC ready because the hot weather's on its way. Be ready for it. Trust R.S. Andrews for that. Looking forward to having lunch. My buddy Dari here coming up very soon too. So we'll come back tomorrow. Live show for us to wrap up the week. And then we'll enjoy Memorial Day, obviously in observance of one of the most important dates on the calendar. Those who made the ultimate sacrifice for the country that we love. But also a time for us to be with family and friends, one of our favorite times of the year. We will see you tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. We'll look forward to talking to you then.